My story is Ferdinand's Tale. My name is Julian Lynch, and I'm the only one presenting, so there we go. Once upon a time, in a rather large forest, there lived a community of animals, and they all lived in harmony, knowing that they had to work for what they could, and they got what they could. And so everyone was happy, except for one person, Fox. His name was Ferdinand. Now, you know all those other folk tales of, the fox is stealing the bread and stuff. In this storyline, that's happened, but he's realized he doesn't really like the way his life is going. So he decides to go and try and apologize to everyone who he has stolen from or lied to. He starts off down the path, going down to Roger Rabbit's house. He knocks on the door, and Roger Rabbit replies tiredly, "Hello, what do you want?" having been awoken from his nap. Ferdinand replies, "I only want to help you. I would like to repay you for what I have done to you." Knowing that Ferdinand was probably not very trustworthy, Roger Rabbit slammed the door in his face. Ferdinand knocked again. "Fine, what is it?" replied Roger Rabbit. "Just let me help you," replied Ferdinand, getting a bit angry. Roger Rabbit replied, "Okay, fine. Just go get me a big 5-pound bag of carrots. That's all I need." So Ferdinand went down to the farmer's market and picked up a big 5-pound bag of carrots, knowing this could feed Roger Rabbit for at least a day. He knocked on Roger Rabbit's door and gave him the carrots. He walked down to the next house, which is Mr. Skeleton's house. He had stolen milk from Mr. Skeleton before, so he knew it would probably have to do with milk. He knocked on the door. Mr. Skeleton opened the door. "What do you want?" Ferdinand said that, "I would like to help you because I feel bad." And Mr. Skeleton replied, having heard about Ferdinand going his way around town trying to help people. Mr. Skeleton was like, "Fine, go down to the store and get me some milk." And that was the end of their conversation. But Ferdinand, since he was such a notorious thief, he wasn't particularly allowed in the store. So he went home and decided to try on some disguises, because being someone who's a notorious criminal, he has to have some disguises. So he went down to his house and looked in his closet. He looked through all his disguises, and each of them had been found out before. So he chose the only one that would work, his Halloween costume, a giant pumpkin. He donned the giant pumpkin and rolled down to the farmer's market. He looked up out of the pumpkin to see where the milk stand was, and he saw it. He slinked back into the pumpkin to figure out where he could how he could give the money to the cashier without being found out. But before he could do that, he was being rolled over, and then he was lifted up into the air. He didn't know what was going on, so he looked out of his pumpkin again and found that he was being transported in a truck right past his house. He had been bought at the pumpkin stand. He looked out and saw that his house was just about to sail by him. So he decided it was now or never, and he jumped out of the pumpkin, and just right as he got into his house, he heard the sound of all those pounds of pumpkins crashing and crushing. When he turned around, he had no idea the surprise he was in for. When he turned around, he saw Mr. Skeleton. "Did you get the milk?" Mr. Skeleton said. "No, I didn't get the milk." "Why do you need the milk so bad?" replied Ferdinand sheepishly. This enraged Mr. Skeleton, who replied, "I am a skeleton. Milk is my life and blood. For this great dishonor, I must curse you, and you will know the importance of milk." Bazap! And Ferdinand was instantly transformed into a skeleton. He had no idea what to do. He had so many questions, but before he could ask a single one, Mr. Skeleton vanished in a puff of white smoke. So Mr. Skeleton knew that the only place he could buy milk now because all his money had been turned into Skelebucks. He had to head on down to Skeletown, where they had the best store for skeletons filled with milk and calcium supplements and cheeses of all varieties. So he went down to Skeletown, and as he was walking through the streets, he heard from an alleyway a voice called, "Hey kid, wanna buy some calcium supplements?" He replied to the voice, "No, that's quite all right, I don't need calcium supplements." The voice replied, "Get him, boys." And the most feared crime gang in the entire force jumped out. Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys. They jumped out and shoved a pumpkin on his head. He had no idea what to do, but from the sheer shock of it, he passed out. When he woke up, he was strapped down to a chair in the Spooky Boys compound with a machine, the Big Boy Poker trademark, pointed directly at him, ready to extract his calcium. So, not knowing what to do, he passed out again. He was so very scared, he passed out a second time. When he awoke, he heard screaming from the other room. "What do you mean you'll get back to me in 3 to 5 business days? I have calcium to extract." And when he looked up, the calcium extractor was mere inches from his face. It had jammed, and now Bones Malone was trying to contact the manufacturer. He remembered the get-out-of-jail-free card in his wallet. He picked it up and he frisbeed it, not knowing what it would do, only knowing that it would help him in some way. It fluttered around in the air until eventually it flew into the vent of the machine. The machine started sputtering and sparking until eventually it blew up. The explosion was set in such a way that it launched Ferdinand into the air. He was flying into space. He had no idea what was going on. He was on the verge of passing out for another time, but instead of passing out, he managed to smack right into the ISS, which 2 arms extended out from the hull and shoved him in through an airlock. Now inside, this is where NASA kept its ultimate magical space cows fed with stardust, or just normal cows fed with normal grass, depending on who you want to believe. And so, through a few minutes of negotiating with the people on the ISS, which is mostly just blackmailing NASA, they finally gave him the space milk, or just normal milk. Having this big jug of milk, he knew this would definitely please Mr. Skeleton. So he hopped into an escape pod and launched back down to Earth. When he hopped out, everyone was amazed and in awe that the infamous crime gang, Bones Malone and the Spooky Boys, had been taken out. And they didn't even know how. It was just a kaboom, and then they're gone. And so he goes to Mr. Skeleton's house, knocks on the door. "Did you get the milk finally?" says Mr. Skeleton. And Ferdinand replies, "Yes," and hands him the milk. Mr. Skeleton thanked him, snapped his fingers, and Ferdinand was a normal fox again. He was so relieved. He went home and vowed to never lie or cheat anyone ever again. The moral of the story is you should work hard and not be a crook or anyone like that.